America's women, taking on a man's job, work up new arguments to support their demands for the vote. Demands that will be fulfilled in a constitutional amendment after the war. How are you going to keep them out of the voting booth after they've helped win the war?
You will notice that all of these are man's jobs. Women had to do this work now. They had no options. Again, women were vital to the war effort. And as it talks about, which we're going to see through in the 1920s, women are able to win the vote due to their work in World War I. Money was the next issue that needed to be addressed. The government had to borrow over $20 billion to help pay for the war. Bonds, called Liberty Loans, were sold to help pay for the war. The government would repay the people for the loan over a number of years. You can still buy bonds today. It's a loan. You give the government your money for so many years, and in return, they give you back your money plus interest. Now, numerous recruiting posters with Uncle Sam saying, "I want you," were posted on buildings, in shops, at parks, in restaurants, bus shelters, as well as other public facilities in urban areas. They were posted in rural areas. Public support for the war effort was critical, and much of the media did its part. Listen to this popular wartime song called "Over There." Hopefully that song sounds a bit familiar. It's very common to hear that song at many patriotic events. Finally, legislation was also passed to help ensure victory. The Espionage Act of 1917, key term, you need to know and understand it, punished anyone found guilty of not helping the war effort. Anyone helping the enemy, hindering recruitments, or inciting riots. This is very similar to the Patriot Act, that's what many would say. And the Espionage Act restricted First Amendment rights to avoid hindering the war effort. One other piece of legislation had Americans watching what words came out of their mouths. The Sedition Act of 1918, again another key term, prohibited any speech that was considered by the U.S. government to be disloyal, profane, or abusive about the government, flag, constitution, or armed forces. Approximately 1,500 Americans were prosecuted for criticizing the government during World War I. Now, I always think about how supportive Americans were of World War I, and is part of that due to this Sedition Act. What would have happened if we would have limited freedom of speech after 9/11? When people are throwing fits about going to Iraq, would it have made a successful war effort? Vietnam, we allowed protests across the country to speak out against Vietnam. Did that prevent us from being successful in Vietnam? It's definitely worth thinking about. Meat and wheat were in limited supplies during the war. Under the guidelines of the U.S. Food Administrator and future President Herbert Hoover, Americans resorted to numerous creative measures on the home front to support the war effort. Home front sacrifices in America included, but were not limited to, meatless Mondays, just as it says, no meat, and wheatless Wednesdays. Whatever we needed to eat, we needed to protect it and be able to ship overseas. That ensured that our soldiers were eating well. We didn't need it as much as they did.